My name is Emily. I come from a small town, a place where everyone knows everyone. It is peaceful and quiet. The streets are not crowded, and the buildings are small, not like the big cities. Life is simple, and I always felt safe there. But today, everything changed. Today was the day I left my small town and traveled to the big city for college. I still remember the excitement mixed with fear in my heart as I boarded the bus. I had heard stories about the big city, about the busy streets, the tall buildings, and the thousands of people who lived there. It was all so different from the quiet life I had known. I didn't know what to expect, but I was excited to start this new chapter of my life. I could hardly believe it. I was finally going to college. The journey was long, and I watched as the scenery outside the window slowly changed. The small, green fields were replaced by large buildings, highways, and the fast-moving cars. It felt unreal. I was leaving my comfort zone and stepping into the unknown. I was scared, but I also knew I couldn't turn back now. I had to face whatever was waiting for me. When I arrived at the college campus, I was amazed by how large everything was. There were students everywhere, walking quickly, talking to each other, and laughing. The campus was huge, and there were so many new faces. I felt tiny and out of place. It seemed like everyone knew each other already, and I didn't know anyone. I felt lost. My first class was about to begin, and I was so nervous. I was afraid of not fitting in, of not being good enough. I had always been the shy one in my small town, and I wondered if I could handle this new environment. The professor entered the room, and everyone stood up. I was surprised by how quickly everything moved. I wasn't used to this speed. In my town, people always took their time. The professor began talking, and I tried my best to pay attention. But my mind was racing. I couldn't stop thinking about how different everything was. The noise, the number of people, the way everyone seemed so confident. I felt like I was in the middle of a fast-paced movie, and I was the only one who didn't know the script. During the break, I decided to go outside and walk around the campus. I needed some fresh air to calm my nerves. As I walked, I saw groups of students sitting together, talking and laughing. They all seemed so happy and comfortable with each other. I felt like an outsider, standing alone, wondering if I would ever fit in here. I didn't know how to start a conversation or make new friends. I sat down on a bench and took a deep breath. My mind was full of questions. Was I doing the right thing? Could I really make it in this big city? But then I remembered why I was here. I was here to learn, to grow, and to challenge myself. This was the opportunity one had been dreaming of for so long. I stood up and walked towards the cafeteria to get something to eat. As I walked through the crowded hall, I felt overwhelmed by the noise and the number of people. Everyone seemed to know where they were going, and I was just trying to find a place to sit. I finally found an empty table in the corner and sat down with my food. I looked around and saw groups of students chatting and laughing together. I felt lonely, but I didn't let it show. I knew I had to be strong. I had come this far, and I wasn't going to let fear stop me now. The day went by quickly, and before I knew it, it was time to go back to my dorm room. I was exhausted but happy. I had made it through my first day at the big city college. It wasn't easy and it wasn't perfect, but I had done it. I had faced my fears and survived. As I lay in my bed that night, I thought about the day. It had been full of challenges, but I had learned a lot. I had learned that it was okay to be nervous and afraid, but it was also important to keep going, to keep trying. I had learned that I wasn't alone in feeling out of place. Everyone had their own struggles, even though they didn't show it. I closed my eyes and whispered a prayer. I asked for strength and guidance for the days ahead. I knew there would be more challenges, but I was ready. I was ready to face them head-on. The next morning, I woke up feeling a little better. The city didn't feel as scary as it did the day before. I knew it was still big and busy, but I also knew that I had the power to adjust and find my place here. I got dressed, grabbed my bag, and headed out for another day of college life. As I walked through the campus again, I noticed the small things. The students walking around with their books, the bright flowers blooming in the garden, and the small groups of friends talking and laughing together. It was all so different, but it was starting to feel like home. I still didn't know anyone very well, but I felt more confident. I smiled at a few people I passed by, and some of them smiled back. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I realized that fitting in didn't happen overnight. It was a journey, and I was just beginning. As the days went by, I started to feel more comfortable in my new surroundings. The college campus, which had once seemed so overwhelming, began to feel a bit more familiar. Each morning, I woke up with a sense of purpose, ready to face the challenges of the day. But there was still something inside me, a small voice that kept whispering doubts. Was I really cut out for this life in the big city? Was I truly capable of succeeding here? One afternoon, as I walked across the campus, I saw a group of students gathered around a notice board. Curiosity got the better of me, and I walked closer to see what was going on. The board was filled with information about upcoming events, clubs, and activities. I noticed a flyer that caught my eye. It was about a student-led event, an orientation session for newcomers to help them adjust to life in the big city. At first, I hesitated. I didn't know anyone, and the thought of going to an event where I would be surrounded by strangers made me nervous. But then I remembered something I had read in a self-help book. Growth happens when you step out of your comfort zone. I took a deep breath and decided to attend the event. Maybe this would be the opportunity one needed to meet new people and find my place here. That evening, I found myself walking into a large auditorium filled with students who, like me, were eager to learn more about life in the city. The event began with a few speeches, but what really caught my attention was the icebreaker activity. We were divided into small groups and asked to share something about ourselves. When it was my turn, I felt my heart race. I wasn't sure what to say. I wasn't the most outgoing person, and I wasn't used to talking about myself in front of others. But then I remembered that I wasn't alone. Everyone here was new to the city, just like me. I took a deep breath and spoke up. "I'm Emily," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "I come from a small town, and this is my first time in a big city. I'm excited, but also a little scared." To my surprise, several people in the group nodded in understanding. One girl, Maria, smiled and said, "I'm from a small town too. I understand how you feel. It's a big change, isn't it?" We began talking more, and I found myself laughing and sharing stories about our hometowns. By the end of the activity, I felt lighter, like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I realized that I didn't have to go through this experience alone. There were other people who understood what I was going through. After the event, Maria and I decided to grab coffee together. We walked to a nearby cafe, talking about our classes, our dreams, and our fears. I found myself opening up to her in a way I hadn't with anyone else. She had a way of making me feel at ease, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I belonged. Over the next few weeks, Maria and I became close friends. We would meet for coffee between classes, study together, and share our experiences of adjusting to life in the city. She introduced me to some of her friends, and slowly, I began to build my own circle of people I could count on. But despite the growing sense of community around me, there were still moments when the weight of being far from home felt too heavy to bear. I would sometimes get homesick, longing for the quiet streets of my town, for the familiar faces of my family, and for the comfort of my old life. There were days when I would sit in my dorm room, staring out of the window, and wonder if I had made the right choice by coming here. One of those days, after a particularly tough week of classes, I decided to take a walk around the city. I wanted to clear my mind and remind myself why I was here in the first place. The city was just as busy as ever, but there was something calming about walking alone, taking in the sights and sounds around me. I passed by the tall buildings, the crowded streets, and the parks filled with people enjoying the sunshine. There was so much life here, so much energy, and yet I still felt like I was searching for something. I had found friends, yes, but I hadn't yet found the one thing that made me feel truly at home. I walked for hours, just lost in my thoughts, until I found myself in front of a small bookshop. The sign above the door read, "The Book Haven." I wasn't sure why, but something about the shop drew me in. It was a quaint little place, tucked away from the noise of the city. I pushed open the door and stepped inside. The smell of old books filled the air, and the sound of soft classical music played in the background. I wandered through the aisles, running my fingers over the spines of books that seemed to call out to me. It was a peaceful, quiet place, and I felt a sense of calm wash over me as I picked up a book on a shelf. The shopkeeper, an older woman with kind eyes, noticed me and smiled. "Looking for something in particular?" she asked. I shook my head. "Just browsing," I said, feeling a bit shy. She nodded and continued to organize some books on the counter. I took a seat by the window and began reading. The words on the pages seemed to transport me to another world, a world where everything was simpler, quieter. I found myself losing track of time, caught up in the story I was reading. It was exactly what I needed, a moment of escape, a moment of peace. After a while, I decided to leave the bookshop. As I stepped back into the bustling streets, I realized that sometimes the best way to find yourself in a new place is to step away from the crowd and find a quiet corner where you can just breathe. The next day, I shared my experience with Maria. "I went to this bookshop yesterday," I told her. "It was so peaceful. It made me realize that maybe I need to take more time for myself, to slow down and not get caught up in everything happening around me." Maria smiled and nodded. "I get it. We're so busy trying to fit in, trying to adjust to everything, that we forget to take care of ourselves. It's okay to have moments of quiet." Her words stuck with me. I realized that I didn't have to rush through this process of adjusting to life in the city. I could take my time. I could make mistakes, learn, and grow at my own pace. I didn't need to have everything figured out all at once. As the weeks passed, I found that I was beginning to truly enjoy my time in the city. I was making friends, I was doing well in my classes, and I was learning to navigate the fast-paced world around me. But most importantly, I was learning more about myself every day. One evening, as I sat in my dorm room studying for an upcoming exam, I took a moment to reflect on how far I had come. I remembered my first day at college, how scared I had been, how overwhelmed I felt. But now, I wasn't that same scared girl anymore. I had faced my fears, and I had come out stronger on the other side. The city was still big, and I was still learning new things every day, but I had found my place here. And with that, I realized something important. It wasn't the city that made me feel at home. It was the people I had met, the experiences, and the lessons I had learned along the way. Home wasn't a place. It was the feeling of belonging, of being at peace with yourself, no matter where you were. As I closed my textbooks and looked out the window, I knew that I was ready for whatever came next. I was no longer just a girl from a small town. I was someone who had embraced change, faced challenges, and grown in ways I never thought possible. The journey wasn't easy, and it wasn't always fun, but it was mine. And for the first time since arriving in the city, I felt proud of the person I was becoming.